Y'all aren't responding very well. Morning.
Good morning.
There you go. There you go. Does the Bible teach us about expectancy?
No.
Does it say anything that we should expect anything from God? Yeah, it does. All His promises are expectations. You know, we used that study not too long ago. If we'll do this, God will do that. Y'all remember that in 1 John? If we'll do this, God will do that. That's an expectation. But see, here's the other question. Does God have an expectation from us? Yes, He does. He's expecting something from you today. So here's the question. What is it that you brought to Him? Because I guarantee you, if your focus is bringing something to Him, whatever you're leaving with today is exactly what He needed to give you because you weren't focused on you. So right now, I'm going to pray a prayer to open us. We're glad you're here. You're visiting with us, and welcome to the Nut House or whatever you want to call us, to the Crazies. I'm the only sane one in the building. I'm glad you're here. Yeah, that's something. But you know what? What are you expecting to give to Him? And in return, I assure you, He's got what we need. Would you stand with me? Let me bless us. We'll start worship. Let's start off with He who is able to do exceedingly, abundantly, above all we could ever hope, imagine, or think. He is Jesus. Jesus is able to do exceedingly. So whatever you said is the minimum, He's going to exceed it. And it's going to be abundant. The scriptures tell us it's pressed down and shaken together and overflowing to us, His kids. He made another promise. He said, I wouldn't hold anything from you, He said. Anything. But then He also said, come to me. And when you get together, remember me. Remember me. Put your affections, your hope, your thoughts on me. I've got what you need today. But I need you to think about me and believe in me and trust me. Because I am trustworthy, He says. Trust the Lord with all your heart. And lean not on your own understanding. But if in all your ways Robbie will acknowledge Him today, He's going to direct Robbie's path. That's my prayer for us this morning. Direct us. Take us where you want us to go. Teach us what you want us to hear and learn. And change us into the people you want us to be. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Let's worship.
Who can carry like I?
Oh, you're way maker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh, you're way maker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are here, touching every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, healing every heart. I worship you. I worship you. Oh, he's here. You are here. You're turning lives around. I worship you. I worship you. Oh, he's here. You are here. You're mending every heart. I worship you. I worship you. Oh, yes, 'cause you're a way maker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh, sing it out, 'cause he's a way maker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Sing it again, sing it out. 'Cause he's a way maker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 'Cause you are here. You are here. You're moving in our midst. We worship you. Yes, we worship you. You are here. You're working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. Why? 'Cause he's a way maker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh, yes, you're way maker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh, yes, you're way maker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You're way maker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are here. You're mending every heart. We worship you. Yes, we worship you. You are here. Turning lives around. So we worship you. Yes, we worship you. Oh, 'cause you're way maker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Let's build that up.
promises of God there? Yes and amen. For my ways are not your ways, he said. For my thoughts are not your thoughts. But my promises are true. My light is a lamp unto your feet and a light unto your path. I take dark places and make them light. So there are many promises God has for us. We just have to reach out and grab them.
Yes.
And then say they're mine. Because he said so. Not because I'm special. Not because I'm something better than anybody else in this room. Just because my Father said so, it's mine. And I am special because he makes me special. So we thank you today. Thank you for meeting with us because you promised us you would if we come together and make you the focus. So we thank you again, God. Whatever you're going to do, we just say amen. That means I agree with whatever you want to do today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen? Amen. Amen. You find a seat. Great job, team. Awesome. All that. Amen. We're glad you're here. And, we started a series last week, and I want to kind of help you get a little bit caught up here so that it makes sense to you. And you're wondering what in the world. That wasn't me, I promise. And I promised you that we were going to ask you to look at the book of Exodus and Numbers and look at the children of Israel and their plight and their pilgrimage. And we talked about last week that we started a series called Experiencing a Spiritual Breakthrough. For somebody in this room, you need a spiritual breakthrough, just like I need one. And a spiritual breakthrough is possible. So regardless of where you think you are, how far maybe you think you're away from God, no matter what you did yesterday, the day before, or 10 days ago, or 10 years ago, you are never so far away from God that his word doesn't say this. My ear is not so dull I can't hear you. My hand's not so short I can't touch you. And so, if you need a spiritual breakthrough, we're going to kind of get your pencil ready, get your journal ready. If you don't have a journal, there's one in that box right there in front of you. It's yours, our gift to you. We want you to journal and write down. That's why the tables are here. We want you to write down what God's saying. And but before we do that, let me ask you, and I'm going to go back over the chairs here in just a minute to get everybody on the same page. But have you ever gotten stuck in the mud? Anybody? Okay. Now, see, some people think immediately it was your car that got stuck in the mud. See, I'm the world's greatest lawnmower getting stuck in the mud kind of guy. Amen. See, I know that. I appreciate that. You see, I hate when we got these springs in my house that, this past, when all that rain came, they're so full that I can't cut the grass and it drives me crazy because I don't like it not to be cut. So I get as close to it as I can as I make those strips around it because, I'm thinking, I just need it to look good. I don't like it not to look kept. Just funny about that. Well, what's so funny is that the clothes, this week I think I can get one more pass through there because it dried out. It had regular rain. Well, sure enough. Next thing you know, it's so funny. This past week, I was there and I got stuck. And little Eddie came out of the house. He was over on the hill. And I was thinking, I'm all the way back up there. So I hollered at him and said, Eddie, tell Sugar I need her. Bring the little machine we have, this little four-wheel thing called Mishima. It is old Japanese Suzuki kind of thing. I'm going to need a Mishima to get me unstuck. And you know what's so funny? When we get stuck, most of us, in human nature, here's what you do. Whether it's a car, you're thinking if you throttle that thing hard enough, if you kind of push, and you can get that puppy unstuck. It's coming out of here one way or the other. And then, I've been so angry at myself, going, why did you try that? You knew that this was going to happen. And I'll, being Duncan, if Nancy sees me, I'm really in trouble. I'll get out and try to just grab that front little tire and see if I can swing it over this way. Not too hard because, people with back trouble like me can get ourselves in trouble in a hurry. And then what happens, I think, well, I did something stupid the other day. I tried to push it while I was hitting the throttle at the same time. And that's not engaged. But, the blade's not turning. So I'm not that crazy. But I'm thinking, because I didn't want to hear from Sugar that when get stuck again. I mean, don't you understand the concept here, Robbie? That it's just unfair. I don't like it. And so now how many of you have been stuck in this friend pushing back? You just push a little bit, and then he leans over, she leans over, and all of a sudden, whatever that stuff is you're turning is going to go where? Go to them. And oh, I didn't know that was going to happen, right? Yeah, why did you get back here and I get inside? But we've all been stuck, amen? You know what I'm talking about? But here's what's funny about being stuck. I'm going to say 99.9% of the time, you can't get out by yourself. You might find that one time, or that's every, often you might be able to get, but we need somebody who can help us get unstuck. And so the title of this morning is, Are You Stuck? Are you stuck? And do you realize you need somebody to get you unstuck? The children of Israel, over and over and over, kept getting stuck. Would we agree? And last week, and I wrote it down just so I wouldn't forget, because I want to be really, really precise of those of you who were with us this week. We talked last week, and I'm assuming anybody took good notes last week. We said this first chair was the chair, and I'm giving you a little heads up, it's the chair of conflict. And what did we say about that chair? Anybody know? What does that chair represent? Conflict between me and God. Those people who maybe really never even thought about having a relationship with God or wanting to know about having a relationship with God. There's a conflict. I actually said it this way, a person who has chosen not to respond to God. And there's a conflict. Okay? The second chair is the chair of compromise. And what do we say about this chair?
You want to live your way, not his way.
Okay? That person has responded to God, and then somewhere along the line decided I'm going to do it, as Elvis would say, my way. Or Frank Sinatra's a few ways. I did it my way. Did I say that right? Okay. They decided to compromise by taking, they decided to take their thoughts, their ideas of what's better, and what this world has to offer me better than God, and what He has to offer me. So they compromise. And then there's that third chair. We called it a chair, but it's really this one. The reason we got a stool, and we said there was a stool instead of a chair. Why? Because there's no back to this stool. See, when you sit in each chair, you can relax, and especially in the chair of compromise, you can kick back, and that's why that soft chair, and you can relax and enjoy yourself sitting in that chair of compromise. And the longer you, some of you might not realize this, but you got a chair at home that the longer you sit in it, the more you press on the stuff underneath it, and sooner or later, it starts to kind of wear your body pattern. Okay, I'm the only one. It's called a lazy boy or an easy chair. And, the more you sit in it, the more it just, oh God, and you won't sit in any other chair. That's your chair, right? Anybody know what I'm talking about? Okay, that's your chair. So, I want to start, get you to turn your Bibles to Philippians chapter 2, verse 13. Because somebody in the room needs to hear this morning. If you've ever been stuck, you've ever gotten your car stuck, your lawnmower stuck, you turn the wheel, you just get stuck even more, and three things happen. You get dirtier, you get deeper, and eventually you get discouraged. And I guarantee there's somebody in the room today that's discouraged because they feel stuck. They just feel like, I can't get out of this. Well, I want to encourage you with something first and foremost, and I'm going to read this. For it is God who is at work in you, both to will and to work for His good pleasure. Amen? It is God who is at work in you and through you for what? His pleasure. Now, I want you to understand something. Even though you're stuck, God is doing what? He's still working. You might be stuck because God's working. Hello? You might think you got stuck. God allowed you to get stuck so that you could turn to Him, maybe for the first time. Maybe you're in that chair and you've never even thought about God, and God said, well, I want you to know, you're not going to come to know me just because you thought it was your idea. The Bible tells us you can't come to know Him unless He draws you to Himself. That's what the Scriptures teach us. So even before you get saved, if you're in that chair, He's working. And I'm going to give you a word for this word, work. If you look at the Greek, He is acting on our behalf. that word work means. He's doing this for you. Now, I don't know how many of you got stuck in the mud before, but I know that I'm not thinking anybody's working for me. I think somebody's against me. But I want you to understand this. The Bible tells us he's working for us. Now, there's this next part where it says he's working, but he is in you both to will and to work. Now, I'm going to do this one too. The word to will. I'm going to help you understand this because when we take this verse apart, it's going to make sense to you. This word is a progressive word. He's moving you. I'm going to put, there's progress. I know I don't have the prettiest handwriting. But we're moving somewhere. God's always in perpetual motion. There's a continuation to what God's doing. Even though we're stuck, God's at work. There's a progress that's moving. And the next part is to work. And that word to work means he's always. I want you to see this. He's always working. Watch this. He's always working. He's in a process of doing something. It's not mayhem. It's not madness. It's a plan. And I want you to see the good part here. Because it's working to do what? It's going to bring him pleasure when you become what he created you to be. Amen, brother. That word pleasure actually in the Greek means what brings him delight. What brings him delight. So if you think this relationship you're in with God is for you, trust me, friend, it's not. It's for both of you. It's for him and for you. It's so that, he's at work to will. It's progress. It's moving. He's acting on our behalf. He's always doing it. Why? To bring him delight. You say, well, how can I be stuck in the mud and bring him delight? We're going to talk about that here quite a bit over the next couple of weeks. How can that bring him delight? How can my current situation bring God delight? Well, it can if you choose to allow it to bring him delight, to bring him pleasure. Because two things have to happen. Either you're going to keep spinning the wheel, thinking, somehow in your crazy mind like mine, I'm going to get out of this mess. If I keep rocking this thing hard enough, surely, I'm going to get out. And all the time he's saying the same things that I need to say. I need somebody to help me. And he said that to God later. You see, the story of the children of Israel is chronicled with spiritual awakenings and spiritual breakthroughs. We've done the chair. If you understand this, this first one is for, of course, conflict, compromise, and commitment. But if you look at their life, I want to give you kind of some things to put with it. That metal chair, if you were looking at the children of Israel, would represent that 400 years of slavery. See, they didn't want anything to do with God. Remember what we said about that conflict? The person chose not to respond to God. So they spent 400 years in oppressive slavery under the hand of a ruthless leader and a ruthless kind of people. In the worst poverty people could live in. The worst working conditions, the worst living conditions. The food, the water was unclean. They got whatever was left over. And so that metal chair is that conflict. And you see, then there became this exodus, and I'm giving you the Cliff Note version, and there was this 40 years of wandering. And they wandered because they got comfortable. They no longer were in the hard chair. They were no longer eating dirty food and dirty water, but they had compromised, and they were sitting and they just wandered. But you have to remember the story that was told to them. I got this place, and it's got grapes like you never imagined. It's got pomegranates that I don't know if I can even describe them to you. It's got fruit unbelievably in abundance. It's got water that's just, pristine. I've got a place for you. It's called the promised land. Isn't that what he told them? This wasn't an aimless journey. God had a place. Watch this. God was at work when they were smashing bricks for the Pharaoh that was beating the daylights out of them every day. God was at work to will and to work, always working. So what? So that they could bring him to life. So see, they found themselves in that 40 years just compromising. Now, again, I don't have all day to read you the story of Exodus or the book of Numbers, but I asked you last week to read those two books or highlights from it so you can kind of get caught up on the story. But see, we're just like the children of Israel. You know, for some of us, God wrestled with us and we got out of the chair of conflict. We finally gave our heart to Christ. We finally succumbed and said, Lord, come into my heart and save me. I'm tired of living for me. I want to live for you. I'm tired of, the dirty, stinky life that I have, and I want a new life, and he gave it to us. We sat in the seat in the middle called compromise. We enjoyed it, got comfortable, started doing some good stuff, making us feel better about the good stuff we were doing for God. And see, some of us have sat in this chair called that stool. And this is the person who is committed to whatever God wants to do. It doesn't matter because they understand no matter where they're at, he's working. It's a will, it's a progress. He's acting on their behalf because they want their life to delight him and bring him pleasure. Friend, I'm 58 years old. And I've lived more than half my life. And if I were 35 today or 30, I'd probably be telling you the same thing. Do we want to spend the next 25 years just kind of meandering through this thing? Or do we want to discover where that real promised land is that God promised you and me? That land flowing with milk and honey and grapes and pomegranates like we can't even imagine in our wildest dreams. You see, depending on which chair you sit in, I'm going to say this to you. That chair habitually is controlling your life. That chair, depending on which one you're in, basically gives you your values, your goals, your character, your marriage, your children, how you spend your time, how you spend your money, what you do, what you don't do. And so, when we think about this history of the children of Israel, leaving 400 years of bondage, and then finding some spiritual breakthroughs where even along the journey, watch this is pretty crazy. God even said, watch this water that I'm going to give you. It's coming out of this rock. And I'm going to hit this rock and this water is going to, what you've been drinking is not anything close to what I'm going to allow you to drink, even in the midst of the wandering. Hello, y'all tracking with me so far? So you can wander. He's still going to provide you water that's better than what you had in captivity. Watch this. Okay. What you ate back there, it was terrible. I'll even bring you manna from heaven. I'll supply it for you. Even in your wandering, I'm going to take care of you. So wherever you find yourself, whether you're wandering, whether you're in conflict, or whether you're totally committed, God said, listen, I'm still at work. The will and the work for my good pleasure. I just need you to realize and understand that it's my heart's desire that Robbie Bailey pleases me. Amen or amen? Amen. I am convinced that God is calling believers back to a life of total commitment, to become disciplined Christians, which leads us to a God, well, I won't say a separated life unto the Lord. We're going to look at those passages here in just a second. So here's the question I got for us. Are you stuck? You see, and some of you have heard me say this, when my mentor and I were doing the study in the book of Exodus years ago, he blew my mind with a lot of stuff. He was just so unbelievable. And he said to me, he said, you know that historians have said there's either, and I looked at it again, there's somewhere between 2 and 4 million people left Egypt, depending on how you count the adults and the the children. Plus, some people only counted the Israelites, but there were other people who were part of that slavery that had been taken into captivity by the Egyptians that weren't Israelites. So, there was somewhere between 2 and 4 million people walked out of the city of Egypt, the land of Egypt, and followed Moses out to the desert. You know how many of them made it? How many adults made it to the promised land? You know who they were? Joshua and Caleb. That's not a very good statistic. Would you agree? 2 out of 4 million or 2 out of 2 million. Pick a number. Why? We're going to look at that passage in just a second. What did Caleb and Joshua see that nobody else saw? So are you stuck? So I'm going to give you 3 things. Number 1, first and foremost, you got to realize you're stuck and acknowledge it. Not to anybody, but to God. I'm stuck. I'm stuck. See, some people don't realize they're stuck. They become so comfortable with their life, they really don't see any reason to change. My marriage is better than average, so why should I do anything different? Why should I reach for the stars in my marriage when it's okie dokie? What's this? She ain't complaining. He ain't screaming and hollering. It's above average, right? It's not as bad. Like I say, it's not as bad as. I was going to say somebody's name, but y'all don't need to start looking. It's not as bad as Robbie and Nancy. By the way, we got a great marriage. Incredible marriage. Not because of me, because of her. So why do we get to the point where it's okay? My kid, how many parents would say, what's this, John? If I were to ask you, would you, John, because he's closest to me, are your kids just average, right? Yeah. If they got more of your gene pool, they would have been above average, of course. I mean, I know how you look at it. How many parents would say, yeah, my kids are just so-so? There's not a parent in this room that thinks your kid is above average. My mom might think a little differently than that, but, I mean, there's not a parent in this stinking room. God, I mean, even when I was doing stuff I shouldn't do, my mom still thought I is the greatest thing on the planet. I mean, I'm serious, because that's what parents love, right? My kids. So why in the world do we see our relationship with God? I'm a little better now. Are you stuck? You see, people who are stuck have bought into average is okay. I quoted you a verse when we prayed, exceedingly abundantly above all we could ever do. Exceedingly. That ain't average. That's not, I want you to eat the fruit off the ground. I want you to pick it from the vine. Hello? But you can't pick it off the vine until you're in the land where it's growing from. See, some of us are eating food. Watch this. Some of us are eating food that somebody brought us from that land. Hello? I got some husbands and wives in this room. The husband's eating off the food she's bringing him. Hello? Pastor, you're going to meddling now, so you need to stop. But it's truthful, isn't it? So why in the world did they decide that average was okay, and why do we decide that average is okay? If you got your Bible, look back with me real quick. Let's go to Numbers. I'm going to show you this. And again, this is the highlight version, so, I'm going to help you out a little bit. Go back to Numbers, chapter 6. Numbers chapter 6. And I'm not going to read this whole thing to you, but you need to read from verse 1 to verse 12. Watch what he says. I'm going to give you the highlight version. And again, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the sons of Israel and say to them, when a man or woman makes a special vow as a Nazirite, they must dedicate themselves unto the Lord. Now, that's the very first step, to dedicate. And then he comes down in verse 4 and says, and all the days they separate They shall not eat anything that's produced by the grapevine or from the seeds or from the skin. Verse 5, and they make a vow of separation, not to cut their hair. And then once again, in the latter part, that they would separate themselves unto the Lord. Verse 6, and all the days their separation to the Lord shall not go near to a dead person. And he's just going through this litany because, look at verse 8, because of their separation is unto God is on his head. All the days they separate, all the days of his separation, he is holy unto the Lord. Look at verse 12. The very last part, he says, and it shall be a void because his separation was defiled. See, God's called us to separate ourselves from things he's told us not to be a part of. God's told us not to go close to the pond because it's wet down there, and you're hard-headed and do it anyway, Robbie Bailey. And you got stuck not because you decided to do something that you shouldn't have done. You got stuck because you went against what I told you not to do. Because you decided not to separate yourself. Wow. If you read that rest of chapter 6, you're going to see where he told them there's a reason he needs them to separate. I love the latter part when Aaron's benediction in verse 24, he says, and the Lord will bless you and keep you, and the Lord will make his face shine upon you, and he'll be gracious unto you, and the Lord will lift his countenance upon you and give you peace. You know why? Because he's at work. Continually. No matter where you find yourself, he's at work. All right, flip over with me real quick and turn over to Numbers. Numbers chapter 13 and 14. Just turn over with me real quick. You see, well, look at, well, yeah, go back to chapter 12. I love that part down there in verse 3. It says, Moses was very humble, more than any man who was on the face of the earth. You see, that came through a process. See, and let me tell you, God said this about Moses, not while he was in the chair of compromise, but when he was in the chair of commitment. Because Moses has sat in that chair. How long did Moses stay out in the desert? 40 years. He knew. I mean, he wouldn't have gone and told Pharaoh, I'm not your kid. Right? I was born of a Hebrew. He knew God was stirring and doing something. Then he was expelled from the land of Egypt because he killed somebody. And Pharaoh expelled him. He knew then that God was at work in his life. He knew then that God had something for him to do. And so, but he got comfortable. He got married, started having kids, making a pretty good income. Right? Things were pretty average. Then all of a sudden there became a burning bush. Moses encountered God. That's to take your shoes off. Where you're standing is a holy place. Anytime God speaks to us, it's a holy place. And you know, I've said this many times to some of you in the room, you're going to think, well, he's told me this before. But you know what? That same piece of land, that little piece of crop of bush, was just a crop of bush 10 seconds before God showed up. But once the moment God showed up, that place became holy. And watch this. The moment God moved himself from that place, it's just a crop of dirt again. Where's God's holy place now? Living in me and living in you. I'm going to make my abode in you, Robbie. I want you to become what I created you. I want you to become my delight. I want you to please me. Wow. So when you look at this passage, flip over to chapter 13. He says, he tells him right there in verse 2, I'm going to give you the sons of Israel. He's making another promise to Moses. And you got to remember, for this period of time, they wandered. But if you flip over, here come, he sends the spies out. And in verse 27, he says, they went into the land, where you sent us, and certainly it does flow with milk and honey. Nevertheless, the people who live in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there, and Ameliak was living in the land of Negev, and the Hittite, the Jebusites, and the Amorites are all living in the hill country, and the Canaanites, that's a lot of folks. I don't know where all these people came from, but there's a whole lot of different people, are living by the sea and by the side of Jordan. And Caleb quieted the people, and he said before Moses, said, we should by all means go up and take possession of it, for we are surely overcoming. But the men who had gone up with him said, we are not able to do this against these people, for they're too strong for us. And they gave out to the sons of Israel a bad report of the land which they had spied out, saying, the land to which we have gone is spying out, is the land of ours, its inhabitants, and all the people from whom we saw in it are men of great size. There also we saw Nephilim, son of Anak, part of that tribe, and we became grasshoppers in our own sight, so we were in their sight. Verse 5 of chapter 14, then Moses said to Aaron, and Aaron fell on their faces in the presence of the assembly of the congregation of the sons of Israel. Joshua the son of Nun, Caleb the son of Jephunneh, of whom he had spied out the land, tore their clothes, and they spoke to the congregation of the sons of Israel, saying, the land from which we passed through to spy out is an exceedingly good land. And if the Lord is pleased with us, hold on a minute. I've heard that word somewhere. If the Lord's delight is in us, he will bring us to this land, give it to us, a land which would flow with milk and honey. Look at verse 11. And the Lord said to Moses, how long will these people spurn me? How long will they watch, not believe in me, despite of all the signs which I have performed in their midst? That's a pretty hefty rebuke. It kind of reminds me of that letter to the church in Ephesus, in the book of Revelation, where God says, you left your first love. That's kind of a heavy duty, he spurned them. He told them. But then, I love in verse 18, that same verse, for the Lord is slow to anger and abounding in loving kindness, forgiving iniquities and transgressions. Wow. Isn't that incredible? Even in the midst of this, God's loving kindness and his anger, slow to anger and abundant, forgiving the iniquities. Wow. Look at verse 30 of chapter 14. Surely you shall come into the land for which I swore to settle you, except Caleb the son of Jephunneh and Joshua the son of Nun. Wow. Now, you think, flip over with me just real quick, we'll give you a verse. Chapter 32 of Numbers. Watch what he says there in that verse. None of the men who came up from Egypt, who are 20 years old and upward, shall see the land which I swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, and they did not follow me fully. You might want to put in parentheses, underline, follow me fully. Are you stuck? Do you realize you're stuck? What causes us to get stuck? Unbelief. Not following him fully. Can God do what he says? That's what they asked him. Pretty much, their question to Moses and to God was, can he do what he says he's going to do? Then it tells us that he said, they've seen all these things I've done. What else can I do to prove to them who I am and whose they are? What more can I do? So what causes this? Unbelief. Not following him fully. Giving up, giving in, compromising, getting comfortable. Thinking that average is okie dokie. So number two, what can you and I do to get unstuck? I'll take you right back to Numbers chapter 6. And this is your assignment for the week. I want you to highlight and put in parentheses how many times he tells them to separate themselves. I think some of us need to separate ourselves from things we know we shouldn't be doing. places that we're going we shouldn't go. Watch this, people that we're hanging out we shouldn't be hanging out with. Listen to this, voices that are speaking to our ear. And again, I got to do this just because I'm in the neighborhood. You know, who we're listening to on Facebook, what we're listening to on Facebook. What's that new? Is it Instagram? I got put on Instagram. Didn't even know I got put on Instagram. You know what that is? The worship team put. Is that Instagram y'all put me on? What's that called? Say it loud. Oh, it's a messenger on Facebook. Okay. I'm getting messages from people. Y'all go, where did this come from? I didn't know how it is. I'm getting these messages, and all of a sudden, okay, that's pretty cool. And so then here's what happened. I'm starting to watch the conversations between the different folks on the worship team. I thought that's pretty cool. I don't know if they wanted me to say something, but they didn't ask me to say anything for feelings. But maybe I need to post something on Facebook and let them know they hurt my feelings. Because, you know, I don't do Facebook. I don't know if y'all do. But when I do Facebook, it's all about people telling stuff. I'm going to go, who would put that on the internet? Hello? He's okay. I got to do it. Rather than put it on Facebook, go to God. Tell Him. The rest of us don't need to hear it. Amen. Garbage. But I'm telling you, it's a trap. And we fall into it. I mean, I don't have my phone on me or anything. I don't carry it to church. I don't bring it to worship service. But I mean, people just, you know, who's thinking that? You know, I'll give you a great thing to do one night. Go to eat dinner and just watch. Seriously, just watch. When you hear that beep or that ding or whatever, watch how many people. I got to see, because it might be earth-shattering what they're fixing to share with me. It might we might overturn a government. I mean, that's exactly what I need to read. Or I'm serious. And it's like, they can't wait, but they could be having a conversation with the person across the table. Here's what happens. If you do that at the table, man, I can assure you I'm calling you on it. All right or wrong? My own daughter's in the room. Hello? So we need to separate ourselves from some things that might be culturally acceptable but aren't biblically acceptable. Now, it doesn't say anything about Facebook in the Bible, so don't think, I don't want to hear a quote this week that Robbie said Facebook was wrong in the Bible. I didn't say that. But it leads us to do things that we shouldn't do. Say things we shouldn't say. Be around people we shouldn't be around. Number two, you must want to get unstuck. So you got to separate. You've got to acknowledge that you're stuck and that you're headed in the wrong direction. Now, do you need to acknowledge that to me? No, you don't. You need to acknowledge that to God. God, I'm stuck. And guess what? My wife doesn't even know I'm stuck. My kids don't even really know I'm stuck, but I know I'm stuck. God, I know I'm faking. I'm talking about Robbie. I'm not talking about anybody else in the room, but I know I'm faking my Christian walk. I know I ain't all that in a bag of chips, but I'm letting you know I'm all that in a bag of chips. Anybody ever been there? God forbid I let anybody in my church know that I'm stuck. Friend, I'm just going to tell you, you need a spiritual awakening just as bad as I do. Here's the third thing. I'm going to give you three things. You got to trust Him. And you know what I wrote to myself, the note I wrote to myself? I've got to hold on to what God promised Robert. You see, He promised them something, and they let go of it. They didn't believe it. But see, we're just like that. He promised you something. You know what the promise was? I've come that you can have life and in the abundance of it. That's a promise. But right before that, it says the thief comes to steal, to kill, and destroy you. So you're busy in the kill, steal, and destroy part, and He's wanting you to focus on the pleasure, the progress of giving you an abundant life. See, abundance is not found in what we have. Abundance is found in whose we are. Hello? first person in the room to have abundance. Here's number 3. You've got to trust Him. Some trust in chariots, some trust in horses. And I got to learn to trust in the name of the Lord my God. There was a guy years ago named Roy Smith. He made this statement, and I wrote it as a quote. He said, "No man or woman is ever more than 4 steps away from God." He names the steps. The first step is conviction. Conviction that you know where you're at, not where you need to be. Repentance, the step that says, "God, I need you and I'm wrong. And I'm in desperate need for you." That's repentance. "God, I'm sorry for what I've done." Consecration, that's that separation thing again. It's just a big $5 word, consecration. I wanted to embrace you with a big word. But I've consecrated myself. I've decided to move out of this chair and sit in this chair. We have a little terminology around this place that you've heard, and I use it when I teach the book of Ephesians. And the book of Ephesians to me is the book called All In. That's what that book's all about. God's asking the church in Ephesus, are you all in? And their declaration to Him, we're all in. See, if you're in this chair, you're all in with your relationship with God. I shared with somebody this week. I know what it's like not to be all in. I know what it's like to be Moses and have average and enjoy life, but knowing God's called me to do something. I know what that's like. I know what it's like to sit in that chair and raise my children and pay my bills, all knowing all along that God has called me to do something. I know what compromise is. And I sat in it for way too many years and got very comfortable sitting there. And watch this, and justified why I could stay there. But then one day, God said, through working, in 1992, a 16-year-old little boy hit me at 70 miles an hour head on, and I found myself in a ditch in a Ford Taurus, and I couldn't get out because he had hit me so hard the doors looked like an accordion. And I'll never forget laying on the side of the road when they got me out of that car and asked God, why? I'll never forget laying in that because I was in Anderson, South Carolina, and Nancy couldn't get there. It was really the very first years of cell phone. I had you remember bag phones in those days? I couldn't get it to work. I couldn't call her. I'm laying in this emergency room by myself. I asked God, why? He let me know. He said, I can take you out at any moment. Okay. What's your point? I'm at work. And I need you to bring me pleasure. And you got to get out of that chair and get in that chair so that I can. Well, watch. Let me tell you how smart I am. I'm brilliant. I'm so smart, I think I'm probably the smartest guy in the room. I didn't get out of that chair for another 2 years. No, I'm probably the dumbest guy on the planet. Because I still didn't want to get out of that chair, even after I knew God had spoken to me. Then God takes me to a little place called Hava de Cayo in Cabo Frio, in the southern part of the very tip of the continent of South America in Brazil. God spoke to me again. I called you to do something. I need you to bring me pleasure. Okay, God. What might that be? I need you to leave your I need you to leave your security. I need you to leave everything you have and follow me. Came home. Miss Nancy picked me up at the airport. Immediately it was the last night I was there, he spoke to me. I was laying in a bunk in the mountains of this incredible mountain retreat they had down there, and I'm laying in this bunk, and God just speaking to my heart. So I come home, and knew me, and she said, what's wrong? You okay? Yeah, I'm great. Yeah, good. Almost 2 months, she would ask me periodically, "Doing okay?" You see, my wife knew me better than I knew myself. And finally, I broke down one night and said, I was scared she'd leave me. Because she always told me, she told God she'd never be married to a preacher. You know, at that time, I didn't know what God had called me to do. I just knew He called me to go do something. I thought He really called me to be a missionary. You see, you're my mission field. And so, I told her, I said, I think God's telling me to leave everything we have. And up until that point, I'd never done that. Ever. Taught Sunday school, taught college students, had an incredible ministry at our church, was doing great things for God. I thought, I said, I got something I need you to do. Folks, it took me 2 years to go from there, even after God spoke to me first. So I know how Moses felt. You want me to go back and tell Pharaoh what? You see, God just said, I'll speak for you if you'll just take the first step. So what I'm saying to you today, I'm not preaching to you, I'm telling you the story. I've been there. I've sat in that chair, sat in that chair, I've sat on that stool. And I've sat on this stool and I've gone back to that chair. Anybody know what that's like? Hello? You had a spiritual encounter with God, but yet you decided to move back over that comfortable spot and compromise. Conviction, repentance, consecration. Here's the last one. Faith. That's the 4 steps Roy talked about. So what kind of faith do you have? You see, there are some missionaries in this room. There are some preachers and teachers, worship leaders who need to step out and trust God for the first time and say, I got to get out of this. I'm stuck. I'm not asking you, we're not going to do an altar call this morning. I'm going to leave you with these thoughts. I want you to think about this all week long. Are you stuck? Well, here's what I'm going to hit you with. You can't get out by yourself. You got to call upon His name. You got to ask Him to get you unstuck. And then, you need to take those 4 steps. When you get to the faith one, you'll start moving from there to there. Amen. Some of you, I look around the room, we got young couples with young babies. We got an old group in the back that, you know, what you're called group. Hey. You know, we got every age and genre represented here. And I'm just saying to you, your friend, God's called each and every one of us to do this. To be His delight. It's the choice you make whether you want to be. Amen? So, you know what you're signing. Go back to Numbers chapter 6 and read that and look at those separations. And ask God, what do you need to separate from? Okay? And then next week we'll finish up this series on spiritual breakthrough. All right? We'll pray over you, then I'm going to give you some quick announcements. So let me bless you. Would you stand your feet? Let me bless you. Before I send you out of here. We'll take it straight from God. May the Lord bless you. Keep you. May the Lord make His face shine on you. May the Lord be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up His countenance on you. And may the Lord give you peace. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right, real quick before I let you go. 2 weeks from today, we're going to do baptism. And we're going to do it right down the road, Mike and Marcia's house. I'll have directions next week to give you. But if you need to be baptized, if you're thinking about baptism, or if you got to say, some of you I've already met with who got to say, we're going to baptize you in their creek, river, whatever you want to call it. But we just don't dunk you just to be dunked. You got to be with one of us. Where's Pastor Travis? Yeah, is he in the back? Pastor Joel, raise your hand for me. You need to see one of these guys and meet with them. Set up a time. Don't wait till the day before. and let them hear your testimony, let them kind of share with you. Let me explain something. We don't do rebaptism, okay? Upon your faith. If you're baptized, once you got saved, you're saved and baptized. So we'll talk with you about what baptism is, so but you got to meet with one of us. All right. Secondly, there's a thing on your table talking about the kids. They've got an incredible ministry project. If you want to help with that project this week, please make sure you get that to Miss Kim. I think that's pretty cool. Teaching our kids is not about what we know, it's about serving, and they're going to get the opportunity to do that. Wednesday night kicks back into full gear after the 4th, so I'll see you Wednesday night for prayer time at 6, and then discipleship at 6:30. Where is Randy? What else am I forgetting? I think it was one of those things that you go, okay. Yeah, Children's Church. Yes, thank you, baby. Children's Church kicked off today. There's a bunch of kids in the back, and so, Miss Kim still needs us to help and to pour our lives into kids. So they're in full swing back there, and if you've got some friends that, need a place to come and visit, and up until now, we didn't have a place for the kids from 5 to 10, but we do now. And so invite them to come hang out with us. So don't forget that. We're going to let our guests leave us, and if you're part of the Gathering Community Church, we're going to have a quick information day in about 5 minutes. We're going to let our guests get going, and we'll hug on their necks, and then if you'll get right back, I'll get you out of here quick, but we'll get the information here in about 5 minutes. Somebody raise their hand. What I forget?
Katie?
Oh, huh? Oh, we're going to do, no, we're good.
Okay.
We're good. We're going to do that in just a minute.
Okay.
All right. Everybody good? All right, God bless you. I'll see you in about 5 minutes.